Welcome to our new episode of Speak Revenue. Remember, revenue is not a goal, it's a result. But a result of what? In this show, we turn our eyes from the output towards the input. We speak with sales leaders and entrepreneurs about their journey. So join us on our quest to uncover and learn the root causes of success. Let's unpack what works for them and what didn't. Today, with my guest, Tom Price Daniel from the company Teamed. Tom, thank you so much for joining. Tom, real quick for our audience, who are you? What do you do? What is Teamed? And what makes Teamed so successful?
Oh, Stephen, it's a complicated question. Are you my therapist or is it a podcast? Who am I? I think
It's
for the sake of kind of
revenue
brevity and
therapy.
thank you very much. I need it. We all need it. For the sake of shortness and brevity, I suppose the version I give is that I've been a founder. I've worked as a CRO at several VC-backed organizations. I've had a couple of exits, a back catalogue of errors and learnings to last a lifetime. But today I'm the head of revenue and I do our strategy here at Teamed. Teamed's an employer of record. And what makes us special is our USP. It's the marriage of service and affordability. We go above and beyond. We talk a lot about being smart, fun, knowledgeable people that create endearing moments, not just a job well done, but simply we care more than competition.
What exactly is it that you do?
Yeah, great question. EOR is a word that we kind of band around, but if you're not in the industry and not in the space, it's not something you would have come across. There are companies similarly that you may have heard of, like Deal and Remote, who scaled up extraordinarily quickly during the pandemic, raised a lot of capital. What an EOR is, it's a legal entity that employs workers on behalf of another business. Here at Teamed, we take full responsibility for all aspects of employment, including compliance, payroll, taxes, benefits. So if you think about that, we used to have these kind of notions of businesses that were across multiple geographies, multinational corporations. We've all heard of multinational corporations. We give small, medium-sized businesses the opportunity to reap the benefits of that global workforce. So with Teamed, a German company can hire in Portugal or in South Africa is easily in Munich or Berlin.
So the problem that you're solving is I am a company in one country. I want to have a remote team that works from home. And when I want to recruit and hire people that are not in my country, I need a legal entity through which I can hire them. Is that correct?
Yeah. I think of us as the final wave of kind of globalization. If I look at my iPhone, I think it was designed in kind of Palo Alto. It was built in China and I bought it in London. If I want to hire somebody in San Francisco, it's very difficult for me to do. If I want to hire somebody in China, even more complicated to do. We enable that, right? So if a company wants to hire in China, it's pretty much as simple as they're wanting to hire in their own domestic market. So we give people access,
Who is your typical
not just
customer?
to remote workers, so not just to remote workers, but to actually to the best talent, right? So it's not about working at home. It's like, where am I going to find the best product designer, for example?
And actually, it's also equalizing the location opportunities. I remember when in my last role, I was the chief revenue officer of a startup that is in a not so big city in Germany. And you can name the city. It's Stuttgart, Mercedes-Benz is there, Porsche is there, Bosch is there. So very high paying companies. I was hiring for SDRs and junior salespeople. You don't have them. They're just simply not locally on the market. So I started hiring first in other cities and then very quickly in other countries in Europe where I needed talent. So it's also about access to talent, right?
Yeah, like the world's dominated by kind of metropolitan zones. It's not dominated by talent. We kind of rebalance that, giving all companies access to talent wherever it lives.
Who is your typical customer, or let's say, who is your ideal customer?
Yeah, so we typically work with startups, scale-ups, and SMEs. From 1 to 500 is our kind of ballpark range. We tend to leave the enterprise. We have an enterprise offering. It's not that we can't and don't do it, but typically those kind of organizations lean to some of the more some of the older offerings in the market. Nobody got
Mm.
fired for using PwC type approach.
Yeah, yeah. Any industrial vertical? Is anything shaping there currently in the distributed remote world that you say?
Yeah, really good question. In fact, I just sat down with my team today, and I think that as revenue leaders, we need to be reviewing our ICPs on a really regular basis, making sure that
Yes.
if we look at our buyer's journey, are those kind of story points they reflective of the content that we're delivering and our narrative, and have we diverged at some point? So I'm really big on thinking about ICPs and integrating it into our kind of offering. In terms of verticals and industries that kind of we look at, we have a generalist approach on one hand. We're building pods, so we got pods for different kind of ICPs, and
Mm.
we've got a generalist approach on one hand because a lot of our work's inbound, right? We're a painkiller, not a vitamin. Yeah, we have organizations that have had
Hmm.
hair on fire need. We solve that need
Hmm.
irrespective of their industry. However, we also work with a number of different other segments, and we have targeted pods to that. So we have ones in kind of the bleeding edge of technology. So a pod that looks specifically at AI, looks at Web3, looks at any kind of really early adopter deep tech. Now, the reason
Hmm.
for that is we want to bet on winners. It's like a VC approach,
Hmm.
right? We follow the capital,
Yeah.
make our money if companies scale. So we want to identify the pockets that are going to scale.
All right.
Yeah. And then we also have a niche within accounting firms, which is a slightly unusual one, but there's a reasonable amount of accounting firms globally that are seeking to identify talent in other emerging markets that can support, and we've been well positioned to be able to provide them a service as well.
What is the persona inside a company that you want to talk to?
Depends on the size. The persona could be the founder. It could be, if it's a
Hmm.
startup, it could be their first HR hire. They've got some capital,
Hmm.
they're looking to expand. It could be the finance team. Maybe they're working with deal or remote and they think that they're paying too much. And they want to look at other offerings.
Hmm.
Can be an analyst. There's about 5 or 6 of them. They're fairly atypical within the HR tech space, though.
And how do you go about getting into a meeting, into a conversation with them? You have inbound. So, how do you generate inbound? Is that paid traffic? Is that organic traffic? Is that content marketing? How do you go about that?
Yeah, so 60% is inbound. The rest is
Hmm.
from partners and referrals. Obviously, they have very differing win rates. When I talk about targets for our team and I look at marketing, I'm very focused on win rates as a revenue leader, and revenue rate and win rates broken down by swim lane. So different activities, different win rates. So partnerships, much higher win rate,
Hmm.
paid, lower win rate, much higher opportunity number. So yeah, predominantly they come through paid. As an example, they'll kind of book a meeting with us through our lead routing systems. They'll have a conversation with one of
Hmm.
our team, and we'll talk to them through our value prop.
Real quick, what's the size of first? What's the overall size of the company?
So we're around, yeah, we're growing at kind of 5 or 6 employees a month at the moment. We're about 30 people now.
Okay, that's impressive. Your growth in general is impressive. What's your growth rate currently?
Yeah, it's around 300%, so about 3x.
Nice, 3x. And you've been doing this for 2 years, 3 years, 4 years? You've been around for a while.
Yeah, been around for 3 years. We were bootstrapped up until kind of a seed round last year, and we raised 2.5 million in October of last year.
Nice, nice. That's a solid seat round. Congratulations.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think with our growth rate, we probably could have taken more capital at the time. Maybe we should have, but we got some great investors.
Mhm. I think the race for the bigger round, just for the sake of big round, is over. Like we all have seen investors behave from good sides and bad sides in the recent 12, 20 months. I think there's a general move towards more sustainable finance rounds, more reasonable sign round, and having a good investor seems to become more and more important. It should have always been than just the size of the round.
Yeah, I've in my history, I've taken some good money from some not so useful places. So
Yeah.
yeah, that not all money is the same. I think that's true. I think that the market is definitely shifted. I think that founders now need to be more conscious, or business leaders need to be more conscious of gross margin, CAC payback, routes to profitability. They need to be much more thoughtful about generative AI and how they can use it to be a leaner operation, but still be a better operation. So there's a lot going on, I think, in the space, and it's hard to know the right answers. And a lot of people are making good tech, and kind of we'll see where we get to. But yeah, not taking capital for the sake of it is a good thing.
You mentioned that you're growing at the pace of 5, 6 new teammates every month. That's a lot. Any of those are in your sales team?
Yeah, yeah. In fact, so we've just hired in our sales team today. I put 2 offers out, which I was very pleased about.
Nice, nice. So I'm always fascinated by the sales hiring and recruiting process. I know that you have an opinion on that. Share with us, how do you filter, how do you review, how do you decide in a remote setting, even more challenging, how do you go by recruiting your sales team?
Yeah, look, I've got a bit of a thing against the kind of the SDR hypertrain outbound model. I don't know if any of the audience or listeners that are on here have had the opportunity to have people in that team, and I just think the risk of hiring those can be very high. You know, they're a real desire. There's a march to the next role. It's about a promotion rather than learning.
Mhm.
Not to generalize, because there are some. I've worked with some absolutely fantastic SDRs, but I think that SaaS program we put them on, I don't think is the right approach for a lot of companies. For some, sure, but not all. So I really don't look at that. I've got a pretty comprehensive framework that I do use. I look at what I call ICCT, which is intelligence, it's character, coachability, and track record. And the least important of those for
Mhm.
me is track record. There's a horse here in the UK that's very famous called Red Rum, who won the Grand National many times. That horse was so fantastic, an absolute subpar jockey could have won on it, right? And I think sales is the
Mhm.
same. We really say, "Oh, how did you do in your target? How much did you get over quota?" It's like, actually, that's not relevant question. The relevant question is, how did you do with against your peers? Because it's if the
Yes.
product has an incredible product market fit, then it's very easy to be the jockey on Red Rum. I want to
Yeah.
see people that have been to companies that have terrible product market fit. Yeah, that's going to
Mhm.
teach them a hell of a lot more than something that's flown off the shelves and
Mhm.
they haven't had to work for it.
I absolutely agree. I guess you're eating your own dog food. Are you hiring abroad?
Yeah, yeah. So the offer today, one was in the UK, but the other one it was in Lithuania. The candidates that
Mhm.
got to the final round were based in Spain, Portugal, UK, Lithuania, and Germany. So a real spread.
Interesting. Step us through your recruiting process. Where do you find them? And what's you said, the final round? What are the rounds?
Yeah, again, I've got a kind of a historic career. So my very first career was actually I own an executive search business, which I
Oh,
sold in the early
that helps.
2010s. Yeah. So I've seen a lot of recruitment processes. I don't think there's a one size fits all. I don't think what works for me and my company will work for your and your company. Although I think the framework works, I don't think the process.
Mhm.
I think that we've probably got the balance on recruiting a little bit wrong. And it's really easy now. The market is a little bit the dynamics changed a little bit. So it's a buyer's market, not a candidate market. It's really easy to slip
Mhm.
into some bad habits. And you got to remember
Mhm.
that I don't know how long we've been on this call, but maybe 15 minutes. If this was an interview, my job is to give you as much information as possible so that you can make a decision because you know you way better than I'm ever going to know
Yeah.
you, particularly in 15 minutes.
Yeah.
So I think there's the dynamic of information sharing. I don't think is always particularly good. So my view is share as much as possible. If that candidate needs more interviews, give them more interviews. Typically for us, we do a screen, an interview with one of the senior team, an interview with, which is typically me at this case, an interview with another member of the team who has more of a cultural remit again, and then final round with people that have done the role. And then we take that information, we collate it, and we try to make decisions reasonably.
How long is the decision making process? Like from the application till a yes or no, how long does it take?
It's difficult because if you open up the role, you get a body of people that apply. The earlier ones have a longer one, the end
Mhm.
ones have a shorter one.
Yeah. Okay.
Um,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
typically,
Okay.
what we want to do is we want to get people through a process in a couple of weeks. We want to set a 14-day target for that and be
Mhm.
comprehensive.
Mhm.
Different roles
Mhm.
require different things. I'm a big believer in references. I'm a big believer in tasks. Although I'm not a believer in the tasks that rob people of time and ideas, but I think you can do it in a way that shows
Mhm.
critical thinking, which, depending on the role level, is obviously more important or less important.
I think this is, and I wonder whether you agree. I think having a solid hiring process in place, even if you're not hiring right now, but having that process in place so you can start and stop it at any time, is one of the most underestimated things that startups, especially in the early stage, can do. Because if you agree that talent is your growth engine, having smart people makes you faster and better, then having a process in place is already better than having no process in place. But having a process and a fast and quick and fair process in place allows the startup to punch way above their weight class in comparison to others, and even grab a talent that would usually not even consider
I mean,
joining them.
we've
Would
all
you
been in
agree?
companies, yeah, for sure. We've all been in companies that have gone through scaling, and you look back, and at some point you'll say, when we were a smaller team, we achieved more than we're doing now, right? We've all been in that
Yeah.
situation. So I absolutely 100% agree that the difference between winning and losing when you're scaling is talent. And lots
Yes.
of people ignore that. Lots of people think that it's something else, but it's not, right? Because if you've got a product market fit that isn't 100% ideal, talent will drag you through. If you've got product market fit that is absolutely on the spot, they will drag you to the stratosphere.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm very
Yeah.
much in accordance with that view. And for us, look, in our team, we're extremely focused on culture, right? So
Hmm.
I've got a golden rule across the people that we hire. Not everybody is going to come in and knock the lights out. It'd be lovely if they did, but it's just not the reality.
Hmm. Hmm.
But my golden rule is that everybody tries their best. They work hard. And if everybody works hard, even
Hmm.
if you've got somebody who's not knocking the lights out, they're going to be contributing and they're going to be doing and giving
Yeah.
more than
Yeah.
principally it costs to hire them or employ them, which is obviously the objective of commercial businesses.
I think it was Kim Scott, the author of the book Radical Candor, who introduced the term rock star and superhero. Superheroes are
Yeah.
people who are currently in a personal growth stage. They are more risk friendly. They are more creative. They do this large leap steps forward. But what you really need are rock stars who come in every day and who do their job solid like a rock. And that's why she labels them rock stars. And I
I
think
don't
as you
know.
scale, the need for rock stars increases.
Yeah, I don't know who coined it, so I'm borrowing it, but I often use a phrase that is explorers and settlers and similar vibes,
Yeah.
right? You've got your explorers,
Hmm.
people that will go and create and identify a virgin territory for you, and you've got settlers who will make it work and the process is together.
And
In
then you have
different
city
stages, companies use
planners who
different
are
ways.
reducing the risk.
Yes, yes.
And then you have city planners who come in and reduce the risk and mice the hell out of it. Let me ask you something else. So, hiring is one part of the story, but once they're hired, you need to onboard them, you need to enable them. And I know that you do have an opinion about using frameworks, especially in sales. Let's talk about frameworks in sales.
Yeah, I mean,
What frameworks do you use and how do you pick them?
I think like my starting point is medic is bust, right? There is the cult of medic is a false prophecy. We've seen, I saw a report
Yeah.
out that had 93% of companies using medic. It almost blew my mind. It's a framework for sure, but it's just so inappropriate for most organizations. Even if we change some of the letters so it's a little bit adapted, it's fit for purpose in the right situation. For us, that's not the right situation. And for a ton of companies that have a faster sales cycle, it's definitely not the right approach. For me, the biggest thing about a framework is thinking about what is the thing that inhibits an opportunity to close. And largely, the thing that
Hmm.
drives that is when things go cold, when things go slow. So if we reverse it, what is the thing that is going to create the highest win rate for me? And for that, it is momentum. If my prospect is
Hmm.
talking to me and I'm engaged with my
Yes.
prospect, and I find reasons to be
Yes.
engaged and I structure reasons to be
Mm.
engaged. And that's a critical thing, not just reasons, but structure reasons to be engaged. Then I will attain momentum, which will ultimately improve my win rate, which will mean that we're creating more growth and more revenue for the business. So for us, we use one called BAMFAM. BAMFAM's my favorite. I love BAMFAM. I must talk about BAMFAM every day or every other day. And it's book a meeting from a meeting. Super simple. Okay. Really simple. It's like at the end of the meeting, I book a meeting in a week's time with that organization to say, look, I'm going to go book 15 minutes, same time, to discuss any questions you've got. Okay. When that meeting comes around, if they've not communicated for me for a week, they need to actively go into their email and email me as to why they're not attending the meeting. They've engaged with me. All of a sudden, they're not cold. They're going to give me a reason. They're going to tell me why. Same things when we get to the point of contracts. So I've had a meeting. I've now sent you an MSA or a service agreement or whatever it is that individuals have with their own companies. 1 week later, I've got that meeting in. That meeting, we might not use it, but it's there to discuss any questions you might have about that contract. How many times have we sent contracts out and it's like, but boss, I sent the contract. I don't know what's happening. It's like, well, did you BAMFAM them? Have you got a meeting in the diary? Have they given you a reason why they're not attending? So that's one, is a big one for me. And the second is know me, like me, love me, right? So loads of organizations get this wrong. They just skip the like me bit, right? So they go, know me, love me. Here I am, buy my product. Okay. And that's not how we work in life. It's not how we work as human beings. Eloquent way of that, I think, is the EVA framework, AVA framework, right? So engagement, value, advocacy. I can't get advocacy without getting value, and I can't get value without getting engagement. So I need to focus on being and creating those engagement points, working with my buyer's journey to create the story points about where that bit goes, to create the value, to create the advocacy. And for advocacy, you could swap out closing a client. It's the same thing within a sales framework as well.
Never heard the know me, like me, love me framework, but I'm loving it. That's really refreshing. Let's talk a little bit about how do you get freshly hired salespeople into those frameworks? Do you train them individually? Do you have internal training material? How do you do that?
So, look, we're a remote company. I think put hands up. My general consensus is most companies screw up onboarding. Remote companies are the worst. The leaders of those companies typically have worked in traditional businesses where you get vicarious learning procedures. We don't have that within remote working. We probably don't put enough effort into the framework. As a lover of frameworks in recruitment, we probably don't put enough effort into those frameworks. The way that we do it is we try and do it in cohorts. So we try to give people to join on the same day if we can. It happens more often than not. We then try and do as much on the job learning as possible. And then we try and do as much training as possible. One of the things that I listened to, I can't lay claim to it. I listened to somebody in my network talking about the other day was how they would do serious training. So 2, 3, 4 days training and testing. And they can't go on to the role until they've passed the test. I think that's a great idea. It's something that I'm looking at adopting in our business is when we do pop quizzes, if you like. I still want to try and create some kind of enjoyment out of it. We do pop quizzes to see whether or not this is going in and whether or not they're up to speed. Because ultimately, once you get salespeople and they're on a call, we all have, not all of us, but we have some technology that will tell us what's happening in those calls. But ultimately, if they've got the confidence because they've got the training, they've got the information, they're going to be, and they're going to ramp up at twice the speed. And once you work out what you need, if anyone's done the kind of the maths to say we need to hit 10 million in ARR, how many salespeople do we need to do that? How much time do we need? Kind of scary, right? Because once you add in ramp up, it's like the numbers don't always add up. And if you add in demand and marketing even earlier than that, it's even scarier. So you really got to focus on getting them ramped up in as quick a time as possible and really invest as executives and leaders, invest in those new hires, junior ones, medium ones, senior ones. Don't want to bring them on board and hit and hope. Don't do all the work. And then the kind of final bit, if you like, that last mile is super important.
I could go out on with you for a long time. There's so much more to uncover, but we are running out of time. Let me ask you a final question. If I would have a time machine and you could write a postcard to the 5 years younger Tom Price Daniel with a warning, with advice, just one sentence that you can send to the 5 years younger self, what would you write on that postcard?
Yeah, that's a superb question. I worked in a business called Head Start that had the opportunity to be unbelievably successful. And I went through exit. It wasn't unsuccessful, but it had the opportunity to be a life-altering business for everybody involved. And we got fixated on our target market because we had one customer, an enormous customer, that was like a black swan, but we couldn't convince ourselves it was a black swan. We believed
Mhm.
if they were going to invest the amount of time and money in using our product, that everybody else
Mhm.
similar to them would. But their use case was reasonably unique. And I go back to myself and say, go back and do that product market research, continually reevaluate whether or not the sector that you're selling into with the product that you have is the right one. And can it be adapted? Is it the right space, the right time? Because if we had adjusted a little bit, if we'd taken our product perhaps out of that enterprise space into
Yeah.
an SMB space, I just saw a product that's, in fact, I'm using a product to hire at the moment, I think is less sophisticated, not as good as we were 5 years ago, and I think just being valued at 700 million. That would be
Yeah.
my postcard to myself 5 years ago. Don't be afraid to course correct. Don't take kind of sunk assumptions as gospel.
Interesting. Interesting. That's very different answer than I usually get for this question. I ask the question to every guest.
Maybe
Very
not,
hands
not
on.
staring barrel of the same situation.
Yeah. 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 Cool. Thanks. Thanks for sharing this story. That's really educating. Tom, thank you so much for joining. All right, everyone. That brings us to the end of this episode of Speak Revenue. I want to thank our guest, Tom from Teamed, for joining us today and sharing his insights. Also, huge shout out to our listeners. Please visit our website at www.speakrevenue.com for a full transcript and additional resources. And if you enjoyed the show, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you go for your listening needs. It really helps to get the word out. Also, follow us on LinkedIn, Insta, YouTube, or wherever you can find us. We'll be back soon with another great guest. Until then, stay curious, keep listening, and stay safe. See you soon. Bye bye.